Okay, welcome everyone. You've joined us for, well, quite a fascinating exploration today.
Hmm?
You shared a really compelling YouTube video. What's the real meaning of salvation in Christ? From Prayer School with Dr. Olivia Precious Cooper.
That's the one.
And we're going to, really dig into the ideas she presents there.
Absolutely.
Our kind of mission here is to unpack her core argument, understand her key insights about salvation, about Christ, especially since she offers a perspective that, well, it might go a bit beyond the common understanding for some.
It really might. And what struck me immediately was her willingness to really examine some foundational beliefs
Hmm.
about why Christ came, what salvation actually means.
Right.
And she comes at it from a very personal place, which I think, adds a certain weight to it.
That personal angle is
Yeah.
key. She starts by describing this very relatable struggle,
Yeah,
feeling distant from God, a sense of guilt, even when you're genuinely trying to connect more deeply.
exactly. That sort of yearning, that feeling that something's still blocking the way. And it's this feeling that fuels her central question. Is there maybe more to Christ's coming than just, well, the forgiveness of sins? It's that tension, isn't it, between tradition and a deeper feeling?
It is, and that leads her to make a really quite a striking statement early on. She
Mm.
says, and I'm quoting here, "No, Yeshua's coming was not about dying for me and you to be forgiven. Not about that."
Yeah, that definitely catches your attention.
It does. It makes you pause.
It directly challenges a very, very widely held belief. But it's important to see she isn't dismissing forgiveness entirely. Not at all.
Right. She reframes it.
Exactly. She puts it into a bigger picture. Her argument is that Christ came primarily to bring life more abundantly, quoting John 10:10:10. So forgiveness, in her view, it's part of that life-giving package.
But not the main reason.
Not the sole, primary purpose, no. It's an essential component, but not the headline act, maybe.
She uses these great analogies to explain it. Like forgiveness is like the eggs in a cake.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, yeah, you need them for the cake, but the eggs aren't the cake itself.
That's such a helpful picture, isn't it? Because if you just focus on the eggs, you miss the whole point, the whole delicious cake.
Exactly. And then she has another one. The baking pan represented the cross.
Right.
She suggests we sometimes get so fixated on the pan, the tool, the instrument.
That we forget about the cake, the actual result, the purpose.
Yeah, it's like we're venerating the delivery system instead of the gift itself. And this, she argues, this intense focus on sin and the cross can actually, maybe unintentionally, hold believers back.
Yeah, what's interesting there is how she links that overemphasis to feeling kind of constantly defeated or stuck in what she calls sin consciousness.
Can you elaborate on sin consciousness just a bit?
Sure. It's generally understood as this persistent awareness, this focus on your own sinfulness, your shortcomings, almost defining yourself by them in a religious sense. Dr. Cooper's point is that dwelling there creates a kind of spiritual paralysis.
Paralysis.
Mm.
She uses that image of a holding pattern.
Yes, like planes circling, ready to land, but they just can't. Believers are ready for growth, she suggests, born again, but this constant gaze on sin keeps them circling, stuck.
Unable to move forward.
Right. And she thinks this often comes down to the limits created by what we're taught. What one is taught creates limits, so she says.
It's like the sky's the limit idea. If that's the boundary you internalize, you might not even think beyond it.
Precisely. If the main message you hear is about escaping hell, maybe getting some rewards later in heaven, she calls it a mansion mentality.
Right. Focusing on the future reward.
And that becomes the ceiling of your aspiration. She contrasts that with what she calls a throne mentality,
Interesting.
which is about understanding you have a place, a relationship, access with God right now, a present reality. And she feels that limited teaching often stops people even considering that possibility.
So that raises questions about the focus of religious teaching itself. She directly asks about the heavy emphasis on Christ's death in many traditions, all the crosses everywhere.
Yes, she poses these really direct, maybe even provocative questions. Things like, why is the message of death so strong?
That people depend on death to get to heaven.
Yeah. And was that God's intention to bombard us with death? It really pushes you to examine the dominant narrative.
And their potential effect.
And she even brings in some historical critique there, suggesting that man in religion used death to enrich themselves. She points to things like purgatory historically and the funding for, say, the Vatican.
That's a strong claim.
It is. It's an assertion about how these messages might at times have been tangled up with more earthly concerns.
And she sees echoes even today. in modern evangelicalism.
Yeah, she points out that even when salvation is presented as a free gift, the narrative often still starts with, or heavily emphasizes, sin, hell, death.
Like our brokenness is always page one.
Kind of, yeah. And while she's clear about her own gratitude for forgiveness absolutely essential, she
Yeah.
says she's convinced Christ's purpose far exceeds just that.
It's not minimizing forgiveness.
Not at all. It's about broadening the scope, seeing the full picture of his mission and what it means for us now.
Which brings us to what she sees as the real good news.
Exactly. And for her, it starts with love. John 3.16, God's initiating love for the world. That's the foundation.
Not primarily about escaping punishment.
No. She contrasts salvation as just, a fire escape from hell with what she calls the better news.
Precious.
Being God's own, having a real present relationship. That throne mentality again, it shifts the focus from fear of what we're saved from to the incredible privilege of what we're saved for.
She brings in Ephesians 1 here, right? The idea of inheritance.
Yes, that concept is huge for her. This idea that we're chosen, adopted, destined for this incredible inheritance in him. Starting there, she argues, with our potential and worth in God's eyes.
Leads to more joy than starting with sin consciousness.
That's her point. It frames salvation as restoration, redemption for relationship, for purpose, not just rescue from something bad.
She had that analogy about Egypt, too.
Oh, yeah, that was powerful. Being physically brought out of Egypt, but still having Egypt, it's mindset. Its limitations inside you.
So the internal shift, understanding your new identity, is crucial.
Absolutely crucial. It's not just a change of location, it's a change of being.
And she sees this reflected in how Jesus dealt with his disciples.
Definitely. She highlights how he treated them, well, like partners, co-laborers. He focused on their potential fishers of men.
Not constantly dredging up their past mistakes.
Exactly. He was focused on where they were going, their purpose. Remember Peter asking about their reward?
Yeah, what's in it for us, basically.
Right. And Jesus doesn't scold him. He assures them of rewards now and in the future. It's all very forward-looking, focused on growth and purpose, not past failures.
And she points to those amazing things Jesus said about them doing greater works.
Where I am, there you may be also.
Oh, there make 'em one. It's all about union, empowerment.
Profound unity, yes. Which leads right into her understanding of salvation as being fundamentally about reconciliation and access.
Reconciliation. Restoring the relationship.
Precisely. Bringing humanity back into a right relationship with God. But she makes this critical distinction. Forgiveness is necessary, yes, but it doesn't automatically equal full intimacy, full access, deep communion.
Oh, okay. She used an analogy for that too, didn't she?
She did. Like, you can forgive someone who hurt you deeply,
Okay.
but that doesn't automatically mean you want them back as your closest confidant, That deep fellowship might require more.
I see. So focusing only on the forgiveness part might leave this distance.
Exactly. It could inadvertently keep alive this sense of unworthiness, this feeling that you can't really approach God boldly, intimately, despite being forgiven.
Which brings us to that idea that sounds, well, maybe a bit radical at first.
Yeah.
Forgetting the past.
Right. And she's quick to clarify. It's not about pretending bad things didn't happen or dodging responsibility.
Okay, so what is it about?
It's rooted in Scripture, specifically Hebrews 8, where it talks about the new covenant and says God declares, their sins and their iniquities will I remember no more.
God chooses not to remember.
That's the pivotal point for her. If God chooses not to constantly bring up our past sins against us, why should we remain weighed down by them?
So it's about us letting go too.
Yes. She argues this, forgetting a conscious choice on our part to move forward based on God's promise is essential to break free from that crippling guilt and shame.
And she sees things like, well, the constant reminders of death and sin in some religious practices.
Like the crosses everywhere, the focus on the death aspect.
As potentially keeping people stuck in that guilt cycle.
That seems to be her concern, yes.
Yeah.
That it hinders people from fully stepping into their new identity.
And she reinterprets the Last Supper instruction. Do this in remembrance of me.
She offers a perspective on it, yeah. That the me refers not just to his death or his works, but to his person, his being, his present reality, an invitation to remember him, to commune with who he is.
Interesting. Okay, and finally, she really emphasizes love as the foundation.
Absolutely. But she draws a distinction between gratitude, being thankful for what God does for us, and a deeper love for who God is.
Okay, gratitude versus love for his being.
Yeah. She poses that challenging question. What if God never does anything good for me? Will I still love him?
Wow. That really makes you think about the basis of your faith.
It does. Is it transactional, based on getting blessings? Or is it rooted in a genuine, unconditional love for God himself, for his character?
Just use a marriage analogy there, too.
Right. True love in a marriage isn't just about what your spouse does for you, but about who they are.
Makes sense.
So her conclusion is that salvation in Christ is ultimately about becoming one with God, this incredible, limitless love relationship. That's the real good news, the union, not just the debt cancellation.
The union itself.
Yes. And getting back to that forgetting idea, she sees purposefully letting go of the past, based on God's promise, as vital for becoming whole, for seeing ourselves the way God sees us, forgiven, yes, but also redeemed, full of potential, children of God, unburdened.
So wrapping up this deep dive into Dr. Cooper's perspective, the big shift seems to be moving from a primary focus on sin and forgiveness.
Although still vital.
Still vital, absolutely, but moving beyond just that towards understanding salvation as this gift of abundant life, reconciliation, and ultimately this really profound, loving union with God.
Yeah, forgiveness becomes the doorway, perhaps, but the destination is this much larger reality of relationship, inheritance, and share life with God.
It's presented not as the whole story,
Yeah,
but as a crucial part of it,
exactly. An essential step on the path to something even greater.
which leaves us with a final thought for you, our listeners, to chew on. Considering this perspective, Dr. Cooper's perspective, how might it change the way you view your relationship with God? And maybe your understanding of what it truly means to be saved.
It's definitely food for thought, a potentially transformative way to look at these core concepts.
It really is. Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive.